We're at the Satyagraha guest house, and what it is originally there was a house built by the architect Norman Kallenbach. It was built in 1908, and the original house was called the Kraal. And this house was then stayed in by Kallenbach and his very close friend Gandhi, and they stayed here for a couple of years. And while in South Africa, Gandhi developed his philosophy of passive resistance, which was known as Satyagraha. And this philosophy of passive resistance was then used in the freedom struggle in India and was also used in the early part of the freedom struggle in South Africa. So the guest house was named after that philosophy. And what has happened is the building was bought by a French company a couple of years ago and subsequently turned into a guest house, and the original building was restored and has been turned into a museum with the assistance of the architect Rocco Bosman, historian Eric Itzkind, and curator Lauren Siegel. What's amazing when you enter the building is you are in a suburban street in Johannesburg, and as soon as you enter, there's a sense of calm. And when you're in the gardens, you don't realize that you're a few steps away from the bustle of Louis Botha Avenue, from the bustle of Joburg, and you are immersed in this calm, in this contemplative space, and that in many respects enhances your experience and more than anything else tells the story of Gandhi and the life that him and Kallenbach lived here when this building was in the middle of the countryside. Well, the thing about the garden is your attention is always drawn to the historic house. It is the most dominant element in the space, and all of the newer buildings around recede into the background. So the history becomes the most important thing. And the new interventions are done very subtly. So if you look at the architectural style, there's very little detailing. There's no fussiness. Even all things like door handles are kept in simple black so that the new never becomes more dominant than the old. And as a philosophy for dealing with heritage buildings, it's very successful because while you're layering the new history onto the old, you at no point try to detract from what is their original. So you enhance the history of the old with the new. The old building was originally called the Kraal, and the reason it was called the Kraal was because it used, if you look at the style, it used a very much more traditional building material. So it's got rondavels in the corners and thatched roofs, and it's very typical of its era with plastered white walls, whereas the new buildings are very honest in their materials usage. There's no plaster, there's no trying to disguise what they are. They're brick buildings, so they're made out of brick. So there's an honesty to them, which I think relates very well again to the connection with Gandhi, because his philosophy was about simplicity and honesty and the whole idea of passive resistance, so being passive and not being aggressive. And I think the new buildings do that very well. So they take out of that philosophy